Hey there everyone, Ramesh here, back again with another video. In this video I am going to talk about Java collection framework best practices. Well, whatever the Java collection best practices that I am going to share in this video are my own experiences working many years as a Java developer. Alright, and these best practices are very useful, guys, and always try to use these best practices in your daily coding or daily day-to-day project work. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. The first best practice that I am going to recommend is choosing the right collections. So this is the first and most important step before using collection. Okay, so depending on the problem that you are trying to solve, always choose the appropriate collection. Alright, so sometimes you choose the wrong collection and your program might work properly but work inefficiently. Okay, and if you choose the right collection, then your program must be much simpler and run much faster. Okay, that's the reason always choose the right collection. Okay, so look at here in Java collections framework hierarchy, we have a lot of interfaces and classes. Okay, and choosing the right collection among them is very important. And look at here, this is the flowchart diagram. Okay, so you can just keep this diagram in the mind so that you will be able to choose the right collection. And before choosing the right collection, make sure that you will answer to these few questions. The questions like, do I need the ordering to maintain? Do I have the null keys and values? Does it allow duplicate elements? Will it be accessed by multiple threads? Like in multi-threaded environment, which collection that that should I use? Do I need a key value pair? Will I need a random access? Does it allow access elements by index? Does it offer fast adding and removing elements? So before choosing collection, you should answer these questions, and then only you will be able to choose the right collection. Guys, this cheat sheet is very important. I found this cheat sheet is very important. Okay, this flowchart. So let's quickly take a look into this flowchart here. So the question here is, will it contain key value pairs or values only? If you have a requirement to have only values in your collection, then go for this section. And if your requirement to have a collection with key value pair, then go for this collection. Okay, let's say if your collection want to store only values, then the question is, will it contain duplicates? Okay, if your collection want to have a duplicate elements, then go for array list. And if your collection don't want to have a duplicate element, then go for hashCode. And again here you need to ask the question like, if order is important, then go for linked hashCode. If it is sorting is important, go for tree set. Okay, so just remember, if you want to store duplicate elements in your collection, then go for array list. Array list is very faster. And if you don't want to store duplicate elements and order is important, then go for linked hashCode. And if you don't want to store duplicate elements and sorting is important, go for tree set. Okay, and here if you want to store the key value pair, then again make sure that you will ask some questions like, insertion order is important or sorted by keys is important. So sorting is important, go for tree map. Order is important, go for linked hash map. Okay, so these are the few questions that you should ask before choosing the right collection. And this flowchart is very important, and it will give you some hint like which collection you should use, okay, to solve your particular problem. Alright, so I hope you pretty much got an idea like how you can choose the right collection. Next best practice is code for interface, not for implementation. So here I want to demonstrate three things, like always use interface type as a reference type, always use interface type as a return type, always use interface types as a method argument. So let's jump into Eclipse IDE and let's try to understand these different best practices. And yeah, so let's jump into Eclipse IDE. So always use interface type as a reference type. So look at here, we have created object of array list class, and array list is nothing but here the reference type, and then we create object of class by using new keyword here, and this is the class, and here we are calling the constructor. So this is typical syntax to create object of the class. Okay, and this best practice says that always use interface type as a reference type. So we should use interface here. We have a list interface which implements array list class, right? So here try to use the list interface. Okay, and if you create hashset class object like this, okay, then make sure that you use interface type as reference type here. For example, hashset class implements set interface, right? So go ahead and use set interface as a reference type here. Okay, so this is very important. The advantage of using always interface type as a reference type is that whenever you want to swap the implementation classes, for example, look at here, list interface has multiple implementation classes like array list, linked list, vector, stack. So whenever, let's say in future your requirement may change, then you can easily replace the implementation classes. For example, here I have array list. Now I want to use a linked list, then I can go ahead and I can use the linked list here. There is no issues or no compilation error. Okay, and let's say in future I want to use a vector, then I can go ahead and you can use the vector implementation class here. Okay, here are some examples. So always use interface type as a reference type, for example list here. So this is the better, and avoid using class as a reference type, for example like this. And in case of set, always use set as a reference type whenever you use a hashset implementation, and avoid using class as a reference type like this. And in case of map, always use map as a reference type. Don't use hash map like other map implementation classes. So these are the few examples. So look at here which one is better and which one you need to avoid. Okay, so having interface type as a reference type is very important, and your code should be flexible to replace the implementation classes, right? Now you are using array list, you can replace array list with linked list, vector, stack, etc. Similarly, in set case, you can replace hashset with linked hashset, okay, tree set, etc. And in case of map, you can replace hash map implementation with linked hash map, okay, and other hash table, etc. So this is very important, guys. Whenever you have a requirement like this, then always use interface type as a reference type. Okay, all right, now let's take a look into always use interface as a return type. For example, let's say you have a method in your class, public static, okay, and so look at here, your method should always return interface type as a return type. Okay, so this is the second best practice. So whenever you write the method, make sure that your method should return the interface as a return type here. So this is the simple example just to demonstrate that always use interface type as a return type. Alright, so whenever you have interfaces, then make sure that you use the interfaces as a return type here. So the third is always use interface type as a method argument. For example, look at here the code snippet. This is the simple code snippet, and it demonstrates that always use interface type as a method argument. For example, we are using list interface as a method argument here. Okay, so this kind of code will basically increase the flexibility of your method. For example, now whenever you call this method, you can pass any implementation over here. For example, any implementation in the sense any implementation of list interface. For example, whenever you call this method, you can pass the object of array list, object of linked list, object of vector, stack. Alright, so all should work whenever you use interface type as list as method argument. And also you can use, for example, set here. Okay, and whenever you call this method, for example, if you call this method from the main method here, and you can pass the object of hashSet, linked hashSet, tree set, etc. So this should work. So this is how you can pass the any implementation to this method. It's very important, guys. So always remember these three best practices. Okay, always use interface type as a reference type, always use interface type as a return type, okay, return type of the method, and always use interface as a method argument. So we understood how to choose the right collection, and then we understood code for interface, not for implementation. The next best practice is use generic type and diamond operator. So look at here, this is the code snippet, and we use generic here to create the object of the class, collection class, right? And look at here, this one is called a diamond operator. So from Java 7 onwards, we can use a diamond operator here. And Java 7 onwards, the compiler will basically infer the generic type of the reference type here, and based on the generic type that we provide here, it will automatically infer the generic type of this class. Okay, so hence we can remove the type here, generic type here, and we can provide the diamond operator. And one more important advantage of generic type and diamond operator here is that, let's say without diamond operator, we need to write the code like this. Let's say if you have a requirement to have a map within a map, then we need to write a code like this. And let's say if we use a diamond operator, then we can simply remove these two declarations and we can provide the diamond operator. Alright, so this code looks more concise and shorter, right? Okay, yeah, so from Java 7 onwards, we can use a diamond operator to remove these declarations. Okay, great. So always use a diamond operator whenever you use Java 7 plus. The next best practice is prefer isEmpty over size method. So I don't see any of the performance issues in both the methods, but using isEmpty method is kind of increase the readability of your code. Always use isEmpty method whenever I want to check whether a collection is empty or not, because this will improve the readability of the code. Okay, next best practice is return empty collections or arrays, don't return null values. So whenever you have a method, then always try to return a empty collection on arrays, but don't return a null. For example, so look at here, this is a code snippet here. So this is a method which returns a list of employees. Okay, so whenever you have a method which returns a list of elements, and here this method basically checks whether this department has particular employees or not. Okay, here basically we add a if condition and to check whether employees are exist in this department or not. Okay, and if this condition fails, then this method returns a list employees object as a null, because here we have declared list object as a null. Okay, so this is not a good practice. So always return a empty object. For example, I can create here a list object. Okay, suppose if your condition fails, then this method should return a empty object of array list. Alright, so either use this kind of logic, or you can also use collections dot empty list. Okay, you can either use object of array list or you can use collections dot empty list here. The next best practice is do not use the classic for loop. So always avoid the using classic for loop, and no one interested in using classic for loop, right? So nowadays there are a lot of methods available to iterate over a list. For example, so look at here, this is a code snippet. We can use this classic for loop to iterate over a list of elements, right? And there is nothing wrong if we write a code to iterate a list of collection like this. However, there is considered bad practice, because so this is a counter variable, right? So So counter variable may lead to potential bugs if we alter this variable inside a for loop. And also this kind of loop is not object oriented, since every collection has its own iterator. So it's always recommended to use the iterator to iterate over collection elements. All right, for example, if you use arraylist or hashset or hashmap, so they have their own iterator, so you can use the iterator to iterate over a list of elements. So always try to use iterator or enhanced for loop. Don't use classic for loop. So next best practice is favor using forEach method with Lambda expressions. So since Java 8, every collection provides forEach method. All right, and forEach method takes functional interface as a method argument. So we can use a Lambda expression to implement a functional interfaces, right? So this this way is very flexible, guys. So whenever you have a requirement to iterate over a collection, then try to use forEach method with Lambda expression. For example, so look at here the code snippet. Here we have a list of elements, okay, and here we are using forEach method to iterate over a list using Lambda expression. So whenever you have a requirement to like iterating over a collection, then always use this in Java 8 provided forEach method with Lambda expression. Okay, great. Next best practice is using arrays and collections utility classes. So whenever you have a requirement for sorting, searching, okay, then try to use arrays and collections utility classes provided methods, because they internally use the best practices and the best algorithms to perform the logic. And so yeah, so just remember, always use collections and arrays utility classes to perform different operations like searching, sorting, manipulation on collections. Okay, the next best practice is prefer concurrent classes over synchronized wrappers. For example, ArrayList, hashset, and hashmap. So these are the classes that don't work in they don't work in multi-threaded environment. So in order to use them in a multi-threaded environment, then we need to explicitly synchronize them, or we need to use its synchronized wrappers. Okay, so instead of using synchronized wrappers, we can use a concurrent classes. So collections framework provided a lot of concurrent classes to work in a multi-threaded environment, so we can use concurrent classes. Okay, instead of using synchronized wrappers on collection classes, we can use concurrent collections to work in a multi-threaded environment. For example, we have concurrent hashmap. Okay, so we can use a concurrent hashmap in multi-threaded environment if you have a requirement to use a hashmap. Okay, guys, these are the few best practices that we frequently use in our project whenever you use collections. Alright guys, I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.